Hey guys, I wanted to welcome you to the first episode of the Ask Rock and H or AskRH segment. I wanted to do a Google Plus Hangout to be able to interact with my audience as much as possible because sometimes doing comments on the videos really just didn't get the job done. And with my time as it's been monopolized lately with my new job, the more subscribers, of course, the videos 2-3 times a week if I can get it done. I just don't have that much time to be able to answer the questions as they come through, and if I do, it's days, after the fact, sometimes weeks after the fact. I even sent out an AskRH request on my Facebook and had people send me some questions, and I didn't even get around to to answering them, and I posted that back on September 8th, and I probably had about 5 people ask me some questions, and I still didn't get around to asking them. So I'm gonna answer those first because I promised them I would. And Sterling Davis is one of them too, so I definitely can't go back on that. So let's see. I've got this pulled up on Evernote here. Um, let's see. Ben Redlings asked me if I could talk about the type of plywood that I used on my table saw, whether it was BC grade or A grade or what, and what would be the difference as well as the prices between them. Basically, the plywood that I used on my table saw cabinet as well as my assembly table, it was all 3/4 inch ply except for the drawer bottoms, which was 1/2 inch. I didn't want to go anything less than that because I needed the stability for anything that weighed quite a bit. The plywood in the beginning that I used was grade A, which was the oak ply that you can get from a big box store. Problem is that I ran into a big amount of spending when I did that. Each sheet of plywood was $50, or what was it, $50 or $55 a sheet. And when you're making cabinets, that goes quick, especially when each one is 35 inches tall. I mean that cuts into half your plywood just to make 2 sides. So I eventually went to BC grade plywood, and the BC just stands for, well, I'll just tell you, the grades stand for defects in your plywood. If you have a grade A plywood, there's very minor defects that are in the facing of both the front and the back, meaning that there's no knots and cracks in the veneer, and if there is, then it's downgraded to either a B or a C. Or they use both, B meaning that the face is few of any defects, and if there are, they're filled, and the C grade on the back, as well as the plies that are in the middle are also C grade, have a few more defects than the B grade. And then as you go down the line, you'll get all the way down to X grade, which is, as you know, horrible. But they tend to use those grades for anything that's outdoors. But if you're wanting to build cabinetry for anything regarding your shop tools, BC grade is probably the most affordable and still get the job done. It doesn't take paint that great unless you prep it first, meaning filling in the cracks and the defects that sometimes the factory misses or pops out. Sometimes they fill them with wood filler, and that will tend to fall out, and you'll have to prep it again. But if you got the money and you don't want to have the time spent on prepping your wood, I suggest going to A grade. Let's see, Gary and Judy Boyd, and more than likely think it's Gary asking this question, but he made a planer bed like I did a while back to take care of his snipe problem. He used a 23/32 on top and a 3/4 inch on the sides as well as the underneath, and he wanted to know, why is there a difference? Why is there metric as well as the standard unit of measurement? And to be honest, I really don't know why they make the 2 different sizes. And I don't know if there's anybody on the Hangout that can shed light on this question. The only deal is if I buy the 23/32, I have to make sure that my dado blades are set properly for that particular size, because making dados in plywood for that particular size is kind of difficult unless you have the specialty made dado stacks. So in answer to that question, I really don't know why they have 2 different sizes. My guess is that they're just trying to balance out the plies on the inside. and because of that, they can't get it all the way up to 3/4 of an inch. Let's see, I got Paul St. George. He asked me, how am I planning on dismantling all the pallets that I've got stacked up underneath me on my awning? And there's two ways you can go about it. Is by prying the wood off of the runners themselves. And if you do that, you will have to make sure that you don't tear them up too bad, and you will have to take the nails out. But if you want the easy way, you can run a circular saw right up the sides to clip off all the nails, and all you're left with is the nails on the center runner. However, you can run the circular saw on both sides of that if you just want to clear out all the nails altogether, and you'll just be left with some short pieces. And if you want to do glue ups and things like that to make a bigger panel, you can still do that. You're just limiting yourself on the length. So if you have the time, you can beat the nails out and still have long pieces of wood. So it just depends on what kind of time you have, and in my case, I'm going to use circular saw on the sides and probably take the nails out of the middle. Let's see. Sterling Davis asked me a question here too. Give me just a second. Got a little bit of background noise that's kind of killing me. There we go. Sterling asked me, Bubinga, Padauk, or walnut? If I had a chance to sand one, stain one, or drill one, which one would I do? And let's see. This was kind of a hard question to answer, but walnut would probably be my choice to drill. Padauk, this was kind of hard. Padauk would probably be my stained, and Bubinga would be my sanding. I just think Bubinga, especially quilted Bubinga, is just gorgeous whenever it's clear coated with like tung oil or poly or anything like that, Danish oil. But Padauk tends to change color as time goes on, so I'd probably stain it. And walnut is still gorgeous, but not as high dollar as Padauk or Bubinga, so I'd probably drill that. He also asked me the best sander to use on small projects because his mouth sander is about to bite it. A detail sander or a finish sander would probably be the only two that I would recommend for the kind of projects that you do, Sterling. Since they are small and you tend to cut things out with your scroll saw, I would probably go with a detail sander, kind of like this one here that I've got from Porter Cable. And you can get this at a big box store, of course. But it has a triangular head on it that can be taken off and used for the other attachments that you have. Plus, it came with all kinds of sandpaper that fit the head, and these things are readily available if you need to order more. The mouth sander has this specific head. Problem is that it's made a little, I'll just say it's just made cheaply. So it's probably going to bite it a lot sooner than something like this will. Fine Tools actually made something like this. They kind of pioneered this design, and some of the other tool companies have kind of jumped on that bandwagon. And this one is a lot more affordable than the Fine, and I haven't had any problems with it. I've done a lot of work with the sander as well as the blades, and it gets the job done great. So this would be my recommendation for the kind of sander that you want. You're just going to spend probably a little bit more money for it than you would one of those Black & Deckers. So let's see. And the last one I've got is from Jeff Berry, and he asked me if my shop is heated or air conditioned, and do I worry about my tools in extreme temperatures? It is air conditioned only because I have a window unit. I've got two windows over here that are kind of skinny, so the window unit is not very big. So it only takes the temperature down in here roughly about 10 to 15 degrees, which is quite a bit for a little air conditioner. The problem is that I don't have my ceiling insulated, and because of that, it releases a lot of that air and heat buildup in the wintertime through my ceiling, which is kind of annoying. So I do plan on getting that taken care of, but as far as my tools go, especially in the cold weather, my air compressor, I make sure to drain the air compressor of all the water as often as I can so the water doesn't freeze. And I do the same thing with my tools. I disconnect them off the lines. I don't leave anything hooked up to the compressor if I can help it. I also take the air line off of the inlet into the tank so air won't be consistently circulated through the hose. Because if any water freezes in the hose, it can expand and crack your hose eventually. I know that's extreme thinking, but if you live in colder climates, It's just something that you might want to do just to prevent any damage to your tools. And the air tools, like I said, I take those off. I store them in their cases if I have it, or a drawer, just to keep them from the outer element temperatures. Now, my garage door is insulated, so that does help quite a bit. But if you have a shop that isn't insulated at all, you might consider taking things like your glue indoors so it doesn't freeze all the time, because eventually that will ruin your glue. But really, guys, that is all I've got for the questions that were sent to me a while back. And if any of you have any questions that cannot get on this show, feel free to send me those on Facebook, as well as Twitter, or you can even email me. Just go to my website and go to the AskRH section, and you can send me questions that way, and I will do that at the very beginning of the show and get those out of the way, and then open it up for the panel just like I'm about to do now. So guys, I've got quite a few. I've got about 6 of you on with me tonight, and I just want to see what kind of questions that you have for me that I can possibly answer, and if I can't answer it, I will try and look it up and get you an answer one day. And if I give you an answer tonight and it's not right, please don't go on the internet and prove me wrong. So let's see. I'm going to just open it up to the panel. Just ask me a question. What you got?
Your mention of the air compressor and stuff got me thinking about how much water builds up in there really, and how often should you empty it? Because I've been trying to watch mine, but I don't find I'm getting much water build up in there. Maybe it's just my environment or something, but
yeah, it does depend on your environment. My humidity level here in Oklahoma is pretty high on a day-to-day basis. It can run anywhere between 60% and 85% humidity in the air. And what your compressor is doing is pulling that outside air into it and just compacting and compacting and compacting into that tank. And the more humidity it pulls out of the air, the more it tends to settle in the bottom of the tank, as well as in your air tools. So if you live in a climate that's not really a high humidity type of climate, then you're not going to get that much water. So as far as draining your tank, if you live in a low-level humidity or even a mid-level humidity, I would probably only drain your tank probably during the summer, maybe once a week. So they recommend to do it every day, but I never really found a whole lot of water buildup unless it was about a week. But if you're in the wintertime, I really don't take a risk on that. You might do it every other day, just because of freezing temperatures.
Well, that's the weird part. Is we actually do have high humidity here, but I don't know what it is. I'm never finding water in my air compressor. But it seems to, if I leave it full of air, it'll decompress itself. So maybe there's some slow leak somewhere that allows it out. I don't know.
If the leak is down low in your tank, maybe your valve at the bottom of your tank might have a slow leak.
Okay.
Because the water just tends to settle down at the bottom. So if you have a leak in that valve, it may be slowly leaking. The decompression may be just from a valve or a fitting on your air compressor that just isn't quite sealed off very good. So I doubt that the humidity is getting out from a big aspect in that sense, but you may be getting some leak down in the lower part of the tank too.
Yeah, I'll check the bottom valve. You got me thinking of that. I might have left it on loose or something, and it's just been draining itself, so to speak, because it has been taking a long time for the air to build up to where the compressor will actually turn off, like a good 15 minutes. And it's just a small tank. It's
yeah.
So.
Yeah. My recommendation for that is just to take a water bottle with some soapy water in it and spray it all over the areas that you have attachments, and just see if you see any bubbling around that area. And if you do, you might want to consider getting those tightened back up.
Jeez, I do that for my car tires. I never thought to do it. I don't know why, but yeah, all right, I'll try that.
All right, let's see. Gary asked me over here on the chat. He said, I just wondered if and when you would cover dado blades. I use one of them body shop filters and use rolls of toilet paper to cover. Are you speaking of to cover the entire blade itself, and are you just doing that to prevent rusting, or I'm just concerned, or maybe damaging of the teeth? If that was the
I had my mic muted, sorry. The toilet paper in the body shop filter was for the moisture in the air for draining your tanks in case you worry about the moisture getting through, because they sell these body shop filters. It's a big canister filter that you can run in line before you get to your power tools, but instead of buying their $40 filters, just grab rolls of Charmin or 50-cent things of toilet paper and throw those in there. And once those get clogged up, it'll keep all the air and the moisture from getting to your tools, and it's a quick, simple fix. But I was asking about the dado blades. I remember I sent you a message on Facebook about it a while back, and wondering if you were ever going to cover that. Because I have a dado set up, but it's for a radial arm saw, and I was wondering if you were going to cover that at all.
On what kind of blades to use for your radial arm saw?
Yeah, that much less, and I bought a set of dado blades, but I have yet to use them because, honestly, most of the videos that are out there on them are not exactly the best, and then you come across the people who tell you what not to do, and not what to do with them.
Dado blades, I mean, there are a wide variety, and there are sizes that range from 6-inch to 8-inch. The use on the radial arm saw is not that common just because radial arm saws are kind of an old style tool that not many people have anymore or want to deal with because they tend to have problems staying true at 90 degrees. So people make sleds and use their table saw for things like that. And they also have a sliding compound saw. Now, me, myself, I do have a radial arm saw. I do not have it properly tuned yet because I have not made a cabinet to house it yet. That is on my list of things to do, but for a radial arm saw, my recommendation would be for a 8-inch blade because typically radial arms are a 10-inch style blade. So the closer you can get to a 10, the better it would be to use. However, the more stacks that you put on that radial arm or even your table saw, the more torque you're going to start having because that's a lot of mass to move around. I've seen people, especially people like Norm Abram, using the dado stacks on a radial arm saw, and they do work great. My concern is how much pull, because the more surface area of cutting blades that you have, when you start pulling it into the wood, because the blades are spinning into the wood, there's a possibility that those blades may start pulling at you fairly quickly. So I really don't prefer using a dado stack and a radial arm saw. And I may be completely off base here. There may be people out there that use them all the time and would swear that they are safe, and they may very well be. It's just not my personal preference. I tend to want to use my table saw a lot more simply because those blades are embedded in my table saw and not out in the open like a radial arm saw. That's just a lot of surface area to really screw yourself up if something does go wrong.
All right, thank you.
Let's see if I got any more chats. Okay, nope, I don't have any more chats. So any other questions? Go ahead.
Have you seen the Pallet Pals from Izzy Swan?
Yes, I have, and I want one really bad. I know that his little design makes pulling pallets apart pretty dang easy. So yeah, I have wanted one for some time.
He put out the new Pallet Pro there lately.
Is that the official name of those things? The Pallet Pro?
I don't remember what the original one, but the new one that he put out, he called it the Pallet Pro, I think.
Okay.
Yeah, the Pallet Pal's the original. Pallet Pro has a little motor on it for people that have bad backs and stuff. That's when he hurt when he hurt his back. He made a new one for his back.
Let's see. It is just as easy to drain your tank at the end of the work session. It looks like a gentleman posted by the name of Rooster. He said that it's just as easy to drain your tank at the end of your work session. I think he's going back to my draining the tank question that you had, Jason. He just recommends to do it at the end of every session, just to kind of get into the habit.
Why not, eh?
I have a question back to the radial arm saw.
Go ahead, Frank.
What can a radial arm saw do that any other type of saw, other than a chop saw or a table saw do? Is there any advantage to having a radial arm saw?
It's not what it can do that others can't. It's mainly what the saw can do by itself that requires 2 or more tools to do the same thing. The reason the radial arm saws were invented is because people that cannot afford a table saw necessarily, which is kind of strange because the radial arm saw is pretty dang expensive, that it has a lot of versatility, meaning your blades are exposed so you see exactly where your line is that you're cutting. It has the ability to do 45 on both sides. But the one feature that you can't find on any other tool is the ability to turn it into a rip cutter, meaning extending your radial arm all the way out and then turning your head 90 degrees and then running your wood in a sideways fashion through that blade and running it like a upside down table saw. Unless you have a really high-end radial arm saw that has really good detents on 0, 45, 22.5, trying to keep that particular blade square and true is just really difficult. And as the years have progressed since the radial arm saw was first invented, the attention to detail when it comes to things like that have just been pretty lax. So I don't know. Nowadays, that's why radial arm saws really aren't in use that much. For one, they're still way expensive because they're super heavy and super durable. There's just the attention to detail parts of it that people just don't like, and including mine, I have a hard time keeping it at 0. That's something I'm going to have to figure out. So I may have to take it apart and tighten a few things up.
Okay. I was just wondering if there was anything that the current radial arm saw or pick up an old radial arm saw could do other than your table saw or your regular miter saw. So you answered that question.
Good. Yeah, it's just really easy to use for people that don't like the blindness of a table saw, just because your lines are all face up.
Gotcha.
Anything else?
I think there might be some in the chat there now.
Yeah, I see Jason has posted something here that he had a radial arm saw but traded it for a lathe. Dang, Jason.
Yeah, it scared me.
Don't find it much use for what I couldn't do with the table saw and a sled. It also scared me to use because of the openness of the blade, and that's exactly what I was saying earlier too. Is just the more stacks of dados that you stick on there too, the more it can jump out and really do some damage.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's an exponential amount of weight to have free spinning in a mobile saw. You know what I mean?
Exactly, and like I said, the quality of the saws, unless you really fork the money out for it, it's just not like it once was. They just don't do that attention to detail anymore.
Yeah, I couldn't pass up mine. I found it on Craigslist for $50 from a 80-year-old cabinet maker that took good care of it. So couldn't pass up the deal for a good radial arm saw.
Yeah, and in my case, if you can find a nice radial arm saw, if you have the use for one, I don't recommend getting rid of it. I mean, it's still a great tool to have in the shop. It's just something else that you can have versatility in making projects, because it does have. And this will answer your question too, Frank. Is that the sliding compound saw only has a distance cut of about 12 inches, roughly. That's the average. But a radial arm saw can go generally up to around 14 to 16 inches. So if you needed to do any cross cuts that you can't accommodate on your compound saw, if you don't have a table saw, then that will do a cross cut a lot wider than most saws.
Now, as you mentioned that you might be building a cabinet for yours, I'm going to sit back and wait till I design mine, because mine's just now sitting on some kind of plywood cabinet.
Yeah, I've been working on the design for quite some time. When I say that, I'm talking like over a year. It's going to accommodate the sliding compound saw, the radial arm saw, as well as cabinet storage up underneath, and a dust collection probably up underneath that runs behind that tees off for both units.
Frank Howarth has a really nice setup with his radial arm saw.
Frank Howarth has a setup for everything.
For everything, yeah.
We could all use a Frank Howarth shop, trust me. Especially with a disc sander the size of my truck.
I could use half his shop.
Yeah, that's true. Let's see. Your opinion on a handheld planer versus I guess a planer, like an electric planer or a surface planer, as far as the sizes, storage, uses. I guess it depends on if you're a tool, like a hand tool guy, or a maybe a hybrid woodworker like Mark Spagnuolo, quotes unquotes. I think if you're looking for a relaxation technique, if you just want to get out in the shop and do something that just calms your mind and your senses, using hand tools has probably got to be the best way to go. Cabinet scrapers, hand planes, even bracing bits, just to do your work. I mean, if you just like the quiet, serene, just no noise whatsoever in the shop, then yeah, hand tools are the way to go. In my instance, I like speed over. I don't know. I just like speed. That's just it. I can't take the time to do hand plane work or cabinet scraper work unless I absolutely have to, and I do it. It's just not very often. So as far as that goes, I prefer power planing or power surface planer. Let's see. As far as the uses, let's see. Sorry, I meant handheld power planer. Oh, now I see that now. Handheld power planer versus a power surface planer, like a lunchbox style. Well, I'll go back to that. I still prefer a power surface planer. Unless you're doing things like shaving doors, there's no reason to, in my instance, to have a like a handheld planer. It's just, I don't know. I think it's one of those gimmick tools, if you ask me. I just don't like them. Really, I just want a big either 13-inch lunchbox planer or maybe a 16-inch power planer that's made by the big companies that I can't stick in this shop. So.
I got one of those little handheld planers, the electric ones, and actually I find on any surface that's wider than its base, you're gonna leave really deep divots in between your planes. I don't use it ever.
Well, I mean, it's just like a hand plane with just a motor stuck on it with a rotating blade. It's almost like a joiner. Yeah, if it's any wider, I mean, if you have a 6-inch joiner, you run into the same problem, because if you're trying to flatten a surface that's any wider than 6 inches, you're going to have to turn it around and then run it over again to try and flatten the surface that you couldn't get on the first pass to get it nice and flat with the other surface. So it's kind of a trial and error. So I just prefer to get it all flat on one coplanar surface in one pass. Let's see. Matt sent me something here. What do you do for the planning phase? I'm still stuck on planes. For the planning phase of your projects, hand-drawn plans, SketchUp, AutoCAD. How long did it take you to plan out your table saw cabinet? In the past, I would work on the fly, and that caused problems to be able to get accurate measurements and trial and error. My trial and error was like way up here before I started drawing my plans out. And, I would start doing it on my iPad because I never really got the hang of SketchUp. And I want to learn SketchUp. Jay Bates has got some great instructional videos that I plan on watching one of these years. But I started doing it on my iPad on a program called iDesign. I got it for like $5, and it's kind of like an AutoCAD drawing that architects use, but I just tend to use it for my woodworking, and it works great. It takes a little bit of getting used to, but I started doing my plans on that, and ever since then, getting my projects done has probably, the time has probably been cut in half, and my accuracy has gone way up, so I could do all my batch cutting first, just to get the pieces down to the sizes that I want. Then I could switch out my regular blade for my dado stack and start doing all of my dado cuts where they need to be, because all those were pre-measured in my plans. and then just sanding and assembly. So before it was, I would make my cuts, then I would change out my blades and do the dados, and I'd change the dado stacks back out for my regular blades. So it just got to be a hassle to do it without having a plan. So if you do a lot of trial and error, I suggest getting a plan drawn out on paper to maybe speed up your process and just really see how much time it really takes off your woodworking and how much accuracy it'll give you. Let's see. Oh, and let me ask the table saw cabinet question. I didn't do that. It took me, gosh, probably about 6 months of planning on my table saw cabinet before I actually started cutting wood on it. I changed my designs probably 3 times before I figured out the layout that I wanted. And even after I got it done, I still wish I'd have run electrical through it, just so I could have plugins everywhere. So that's why I kind of have those on the end caps. I have power strips to plug in. I wish I'd have had just regular power boxes. That would have been a lot nicer and cleaner.
Yeah.
But I kind of ran out of time on that, so and my design just didn't accommodate it. Let's see. What are your thoughts about the Incra table saw setup? Incra table saw setup. Are we talking about my miter gauge that I have, or the fence that you can buy?
Tracks to the side, you know, the one that's like the auto measure type thing, set it once, forget it type thing. It's like the fence system.
Like people mostly use for their routers?
I think some people use it for their routers. It's the big Incra, not the iBox, but their giant measuring system that bolts onto the wings on your table saw. Because I was looking at your build, and I liked the way you designed your cabinet. The only thing that kind of held me back was I'd have to adjust it a little bit to put in that Incra setup. I've been asking a lot of people what they think of it, if they've actually thought about it being worth it or not, because it's not a cheap buy for it.
No, it definitely isn't. And I think I know the one you're talking about, that it looks like a big T, like a fence is here, and then you got an extension out this way that has the slide, I guess, that operates the fence itself.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Yep. To be honest, because I have my table saw and router set up the way I do in that big combo style fashion, I didn't realize or didn't know if it was going to be easy to use and quick to use, because I like the ability to be able to just move my fence over to the router and use it for whatever I need, and then come back to the table saw really quickly. If I had that Incra set up on there, I'd probably have to take it off or turn it around or do something to get it to work the other way to the table saw. I think it was just like a time saver in my case. Plus, I didn't have the cash for it anyway.
Cash is always optional.
True. Very true. Let's see, and yeah, I think Jason commented about that too. It's designed to be used on a table saw and router table combo type setup. $800. Yeah, that's not for me. There's so much between the tools, preset points. Exactly. Yeah. I don't know. I just think it was just it wouldn't have been a very good time saver for me, and the cash is just outrageously high.
Yeah, I want one, but I wouldn't fork out the money for it. maybe that miter that you have, though. I like those. I've been eyeballing those.
That miter gauge is extremely accurate. I've been so happy with that. And the woodworker that I've mentioned in my table saw cabinet build, Lance Robleski, he's the one that sold it to me. I think he was upgrading to a more high dollar one, so he sold that one to me at a pretty good price, and I just couldn't pass it up. But when it comes to setting up for 45 miters and my sanding disc that I made for my table saw, using it to clean up those miters, oh, I never have such prettier joints when I use that miter gauge.
You still use that jig, that table saw setup?
The sanding disc?
Yeah.
Oh yeah. I want to upgrade it to an MDF core instead of plywood, because the plywood that I used wasn't the high grade, like grade A plywood. It wasn't also the high dollar kind that you can get from like a hardwood dealer, because the plies are only 90 degrees from one another. And so there's voids in there that really shouldn't be. I should have bought the plywood that had like the plies running at 30-degree angles from one another as they went down the plywood. So I figured MDF would probably be a lot more solid core with less air pockets than a plywood setup would have. So I'll probably change it up later.
Would handle the moisture changes better too, probably.
Yeah. But it's holding up right now. I mean, it was a 1/2-inch ply setup, and I have very, very little wobble in the whole setup. I tried to minimize it as much as possible by using that circle cutting jig on the bandsaw, but I think it's not necessarily the circle. It's the voids in the plywood itself. I think it's just off weighted a little bit.
Yeah, it wouldn't take much either. With that, it's what, 5,400 RPM?
Yeah, exactly. And I got a lot of backlash from that jig, especially from people that I think have used it in the past, but maybe have cut it by hand, like cutting their circle by hand. And the deal was they said that they wore out their bearings in their table saw. I use it a lot, and I haven't noticed any problems with bearing wear yet. I'm not saying it won't do it, but it all depends on how you make your sanding disc too. What else you got, fellas? This is kind of quiet. I see a lot of muted mics.
I have kids, so I'm being polite. Thank you.
Sorry. Let's see, Chris. I see you over there just being quiet. You got anything?
Yeah, I'm just watching the kids as well, so I got it muted. And we're hanging out outside, so I wanted to come watch the call, but I'm going to watch the kids and hang out outside, so that's why I'm being kind of quiet.
That's why I let my wife have them.
Yeah. Yeah, I like the comment on that the disc sander in your table saw. I think that's pretty sweet. I'm thinking about taking an old router that I have and making a disc sander out of it, but I really need a disc sander, but I remember seeing your video thinking that was really cool, so I don't know, I might go that way too.
It works great if you don't have a table or a dedicated disc sander like old Frank Howarth does.
Yeah.
The table setup on those things are really limited, so you have to make a jig to be able to accommodate something huge, especially something long like a picture frame. And like I said, table saw's already got that, so why not utilize something that has accuracy like a table saw and go with that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, we still got about 15 more minutes, unless we just are done. Let me see. I've got another comment on the video that people are watching live. Let's see. Oh, not a comment. Just a hello.
Well,
How you doing, Mark? Mark Talbert? I think that's right.
I've been making a lot of mallets lately, and I'm wondering the difference between your dead blows and, say, like a joiner's mallet with no weight in it and a carver's mallet. Those different types of mallets. I don't know. You've been making a lot of mallets, so I'm just wondering your feel for the different sizes and weights and.
Well, 1 second here. I've actually made 2 different style mallets. Hey. Yeah, that's the one thing about this show. I can't be super prepared. The first mallet that I ever made was this carpentry mallet, and it has that curved top and kind of a offset face that I usually use for chisel work, and I only use it for chisels that have wooden handles. If anything less than that, it'll dent the mallet up way too bad. But the weight of it is more controlled because it's just a solid wood, and the head's just a little bit heavier than the handle. So you do have a little bit more control when striking chisels, so you don't go too deep in your work. There is some recoil with these, but you're not really using these to just smack the crap out of something. So I wanted to have a dead blow mallet that would have weight to it that I can use without the recoil, for one, because that's what a dead blow mallet does. and also it allows the hammer to do the work more than the user. So the weight that's inside these dead blows, it's a little harder to control how much pressure you hit, which is why I wanted the hammer to do all the work. But as the hammer swings down, the weights are up. So when you strike your object, the weight compacts against the face down here, which causes the recoil to be minimized. So you don't either hit it and strike off the object that you're trying to smack or what. So it's more of a controlled hit than something like the regular carpentry mallet would be. But there's just a trade-off. I mean, this is a controlled hit for smacking the crap out of something. This is a controlled hit for detailed finish work.
Oh, cool.
And then I got to show off John Hines' mallet that he mailed me too. I use this one a bit too. This one is a good weighted mallet. He used 2 different woods, but that maple head is, I mean, that's just the right density for something like chisel work.
I like his handle work too that he does. That what do you call it again? Micra. It's like a plastic he makes.
Oh yeah. Where he made his handles for the knives. Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah. Sorry, I thought it was on that mallet he made too. I thought he put it on the handle there.
No, he wrapped. It's like burlap twine or something like that, and then he dipped that in poly.
Oh, okay.
I was trying to remember the name, what you're talking about now, where he made it out of T-shirts and stuff like that. Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah, it's a weird word. It's like starts with an M, Micra or I can't remember.
Micarta? Is it Micarta?
I honestly couldn't tell you.
What's up, Patrick? I see you joined in on the call here. I think you can't hear me.
What's going on?
Ah, yeah, there you are.
You were talking about Dick Sanders a minute ago.
Oh, yeah, for Sterling? Oh, and there he went. He does that a lot.
I think he has a bad connection in his wood shop.
Yeah, I think so, too. He on these chats of ours that we have during the day, he tends to drop off a lot.
Yeah.
I think he was going to mention his, he made a sander for his lathe.
Oh, yeah, that's right. I thought that was a cool project, especially that table that he made. That was pretty cool.
Yeah, that tilting table to go with it. That's pretty slick. I said that tilting table that he made to go with it, that's pretty slick.
Yeah. And it looked like it was pretty smooth that he made those curves for his hinges really nice and smooth. If anybody got a message from Patrick, he says his Wi-Fi sucks. Well, anybody else got anything? It doesn't even have to be of a woodworking nature. I don't know if there's just something that you're curious about me.
What do you got for jigs there? What's your next jig you're planning on building?
Next jig. Well, my miner's thing up there. My jet fighter. That's what I'm trying to think of.
Your V-wing?
I'm probably going to redo that because it is coming out of the 45 range, and that's why I have to come up on my table saw sanding disc. It's just not quite accurate anymore. I've had it for a long time, and I think those wooden strips, even though they're oak, they've started to come out of alignment. So I may put in some T-tracks to keep those nice and straight once I dial in that 45. So that'll probably be my next jig.
That's a good idea.
How do you find? Oh, sorry, Matt.
No, go ahead.
How do you find those table saw jigs that go over the fence? They hug the fence and slide with the fence. I see you got one over your right shoulder there.
Oh yeah, this one right here.
Yeah.
That one is my spline cutting jig to make splines and picture frames. I actually saw that on, I think it was called Shop Tips, and just a big thick magazine of a whole bunch of jigs. And that one I never knew how they did those splines, and when I saw that jig, I was like, oh yeah, I got to make one of those. You got to be really accurate with the sliding feature, though, on your fence. You can't have any kind of wobble, otherwise you'll have a really sloppy spline that you'll have to fill with wood putty.
Yeah, I made one that it just sat against the fence and went, but I found it awkward to use. I think something that hooks over your actual fence would work a lot better.
Yeah, the only thing that you have to make sure is that your fence is exactly parallel with your blade. But yeah, the one that slides against your fence, you take a risk on that one that if it goes out of alignment from the blade that you'll get kickback. So I wanted something that'll be a little more secure, that if it did kick back at all, it would just shoot straight back off of my fence and not go off in a funky direction.
Huh.
The Patrick again?
No, that was just a Twitter alert.
Are you in your wood shop now?
Yeah.
And that's all the dust that collects on your stuff, or do you go around dusting your stuff?
Back here,
Yeah.
it gets a little dusty, but it's not like super covered and stuff. Just mainly because now I've got that dust collector for my table saw, but my router, on the other hand, it's got a whole bunch of stuff on it that I've kind of bunched up in a big pile. But I plan on making. That's another jig I want to make is a fence to wrap over my existing fence for my router table that'll have dust collection running out the side of it.
All right.
What about the jointing jig on your table saw? You ever use that a whole lot? The one where you slide it over your fence, you can join an edge.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I tend to use it for just speed mainly rather than accuracy. I mean, it still flattens out edges really well, and I tend to use it on plywood, especially if I have plywood that's like a C grade, that whenever I run it through the table saw, it doesn't quite give me a nice flat edge, and then I'll run it over the joining jig to flatten it all out. I don't really do that for pieces that are big and bulky. I only use it on pieces that I cut that are more easily controlled. And somebody that made that joining jig a while back had problems with sniping even after dialing it in. And one of the things that people confuse about that is that whenever you're pushing it over your blade and you're pushing at the same time into your blade, but the force that you exert should be in front of the blade as well as behind the blade. But if you put force right over the blade's going to flex a little bit and cause your piece to get sniped. So you just put force on the fence itself on the front and back and just let your blade do the work, because there's really not a whole lot of pushing that you need to do just to get that table saw to eat the material off. I mean, it does its job very well. You just got to know how to exert the force.
Yeah, I had wondered about that jig because I know you got your setup where you can, run, looks like, what, 3/4 to an inch thick. Like, I wondered if you could make it as high as the blade, like mine comes above the table saw 3 inches. If you can work it all.
If you stack the, that strip of wood that I put on the outfeed part of it, if you just stack those up, you can take it up as high as the blade will let you go. Keep in mind that the higher that you have that blade above the table, the more flex that you're going to get. So, I don't know. I just tend to use it for 3/4 rather than anything higher than that, but it can be used. I'm not saying it can't. I just don't use it that way. Plus, too, another thing about that is that the higher you raise that blade, the more of an alcove that you make in that jig. So if you decide to crank your blade back down, it's going to eat away that outfeed section to where that strip of wood won't be as close to your blade as it once was. So as you're feeding it through, you may clip that section of the outfeed.
Yeah, I got you. Makes sense.
What's up, Nick?
How's it going?
You got anything?
Well, I couldn't remember from that clock behind you where you made the mallets. Did you actually make essentially a real mallet and just cut it in half?
The clock? No, I just pieced it together. I mean, I thought about making a mallet and ripping it, but I figured that would be really difficult and dangerous to do. So I just decided to just piece it together.
Cool.
And I'm going to have to point out I still don't see the big hammer on the wall.
There you go. There it is. Yeah, it's not on the wall. Cut me some slack, will you? I'm trying to get this shop organized.
Well,
It's
you're gonna
still
have to find the studs for that one.
I need one of those big bicycle hook hangers that stick way out like that.
There you go.
So what do you use that mallet for?
To piss off the neighbors.
Halloween, chasing people on Halloween.
Hanging pictures.
Yeah, it's like, you want candy?
I came to my daughter's house. He had a 8-pound sledgehammer that she was tacking pictures on the wall with.
One smack and the nails in the wall.
Yeah, and there's a hole in the wall.
Dad, you got some plaster?
Yeah. I need some filler, please. Let's see, do I have any more? Ron, you said you turned your grinder/buffer on its side and made a jig. What do you mean about that?
Well, that was back when we were talking about the disc sanders. You know, I got the Harbor Freight 7-inch disc, sanding disc, and I made a jig to hold my grinder on its, well, upright, I should say, not on its side, but and then just paralleled it to a platform, so it became my disc sander.
Sweet. Oh, did that work out good for you? I mean, did it have any kind of flex on the sanding disc at all?
Well, you know, it had a little bit, but I mean, you know, you can always spruce it up a little bit. But I needed it for when I was making wishing wells for the yard, and I was using that rough, what do you call it, something landscaping timbers, and I would just take the whole thing and use it like that, you know, to bring it down a little bit. It worked out pretty good.
I never would have thought to use a grinder. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, and it's you got adjustable speed too, so that's kind of cool. Good old Harbor Freight.
Let's see. How much time do I have left?
I was going to buy a motor from Harbor Freight and make a giant Frank sander out of it.
Now the ideas are starting to swim in everybody's head.
Next week, instead of the scrap wood, it'll be the sanding disc.
What can you use to make a sanding disc?
Yeah.
That's pretty cool.
I'm probably the only real non-woodworker here. I mainly deal in concrete, so I'm trying to blend the two together.
How's that working out for you?
You know, it's not too bad right now. As of now, I'm actually, because I do a lot of decorative concrete work and design molds, that's the reason why I was asking about the dado blades, and I stick to using a radial arm saw. It's for building mold boxes really quick out of melamine. But I'm actually starting to, I talked with a guy who's a furniture builder in New Jersey the other day, and I brought him some stuff that I did, and I told him what I wanted to do, and he kind of laughed at me, but then he thought about it, where I'm going to start actually doing dovetails in concrete and in regular wood and make benches and stuff for clients.
Dude, that would be freaking awesome if that could be pulled off.
We sat there for a little while playing with it, and of course he turned around and goes, it'd be a lot faster. He's trying to talk me into doing it the old-fashioned way, by cutting them by hand. And I was like, Ingra iBox, so much faster.
Yeah. Yeah, that would be cool though if you could mesh concrete dovetails with wood. That would be cool.
Yeah, I mean, I do some inlays with it, and I started to try to do some inlays, but what I found out is doing like Purple Heart or something like that, that since wood likes to swell and shrink and everything else, that it looks great and it's pretty for a decorative aspect, so I can do it on a vase or a vase if I wanted to, but when you want to do it like with a countertop, like if I did a countertop in your home, in your kitchen or something, you can't kind of do that nice inset because it'll flex over time and almost have to do like a veneer. But then then you have to tell the client, well, it's not true hardwood because it's only a thin piece.
Oh yeah, customers hate the word plywood. They hear that and they're like, eh.
Oh yeah. Just
They
like
don't understand that it's used on just about everything they own, but they want a woodworking project. You mentioned plywood.
oh yeah, they honestly expect that they can go to Pottery Barn, pay $1,200 for something to throw a beach towel on. They think that it's made out of some expensive exotic wood until it breaks and falls apart, and they find out that it's MDF or something.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that term solid wood or hardwood is used very loosely in those commercial grade furniture makers. So yeah, you have to be careful with the furniture you buy, especially at even places like in my city, Mathis Brothers is one of the biggest furniture distributors in the area, and they use that solid wood very, very loosely. And I've had furniture from them that got dented in one place, and then I go to peel it back, and you see like an MDF core or something like that. It just infuriates me.
Oh, you got that right.
Well, guys, it has been an hour, so I think we're going to go ahead and cut this off. Just want to tell everybody that tonight, or this afternoon in my case, has been kind of a trial run for this whole thing. So if there's a better time that would work out for you, whether it be like during the week, in the evenings for me because I work during the week, or if you want to try and do it on a Saturday, I just don't want to interfere with like the Maritime Woodworkers as well as Brian Gidney's show, so I'm trying to make sure that I don't interfere with their time slots to take viewerships away from them. So just leave me some comments on that in the comments below this video, and be sure and write down some questions that you have for me, and the next time we have this hangout, you guys can all just fire away, and I'll try and answer them to the best I can. So hope you guys enjoyed it. I want to thank y'all for coming out. It's been a great fun. So I guess I will see you guys in another 2 weeks. So thank you very much, y'all.
Thank you,
Good
Drew.
job, Drew. Thanks.
All right. Y'all take care.